Okay, so we'll go ahead and start. I'm going to share my screen if that's a thumbs up. Yep. Okay, I have control now. Okay. I hope everyone can see the screen share I've provided. On the front is a picture of a bridge. Are we good across the board? Everyone can see the bridge and the PowerPoint? All right, good deal. I need to be able to see the interpreter as well as I'm going through the meeting today. Tennessee has many areas such as Knoxville and many bridges that we need to establish. How do we get from one side to the other side? Whether it's culture, deaf history, and many people talk about deaf and hard of hearing culture and how it has its own culture. And if we meet someone like a deaf or hard of hearing student, how do we approach cultural competency with that individual? Often we meet a person, maybe from a different culture than our own, and we'll start asking questions because we don't know. So for this particular presentation, we're going to talk about best practice, but hopefully answer your questions about, the whole spectrum of deaf and hard of hearing related to communication, preferences, background, experience, and so forth. And then for this particular presentation, we want to focus on from language deprivation perspective. We don't necessarily approach everyone from that perspective, but that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Let me introduce myself just a little bit. Hold on, the interpreter is trying to catch up here. There's going to be some question and answer at the end, but if something comes to mind during the presentation, like if I'm presenting on stage or at a conference, people can't just interrupt. So I suggest that they take notes so that you don't forget your question at the end. So the ground rules for tonight are your video off and your microphone muted. But you will have an opportunity for audience participation. Hold on a second. So I'm hoping we'll have some time for some in-depth conversation about the topic tonight. So I hope that that's good. The interpreter is going to ask for just hold on a second. The video quality is not good. I'm sorry. So I'm a little bit. Okay. Bye. All right, good deal. So here's a little bit about me, my bio. In 2005, I graduated Gallaudet University with my major or my specialty in school psychology in deafness. I kept myself limited to a specific area of expertise. Now that my wife has joined me, I'm kind of following her suit. And we're working as behavioral management specialists. It's a little bit different than what you expect in the school behavioral arena. We're talking more about treatment plans, and pretty much functional behavior assessment and improving behavior plans. So that's what we focus more on now. We will do some supervisory work one-on-one with children for the purpose of collecting data. And that is the goal is behavioral improvement. So I focused on that arena for about 8 years. I want to do some evaluations and consultation. Currently, I'm working in the school at a deaf school, TSD. I've worked also in Maryland. And there are statistically, a lot of students that come from deaf families. So children have access to language from birth as they grow up, and their language acquisition is fluent. I've had many opportunities to work with deaf children. They're reading on or above grade level, which is great. Which tells me that a deaf child with access to language needs to have access to language on day one. That is critical. And if that happens, that is great. That way, the child after college can have a professional level job, possibly own their own business. And the interpreters are going to switch.
Sorry, just one more second. Okay. I've also spent some time working in other countries with deaf schools abroad. I've worked in 7 schools for the deaf all over the world, hosting psychology trainings as well as consulting on best practices. I've also presented in various American societies for focusing on work with deaf children. And I've had the opportunity to present trainings where entities need to develop and improve services based on their needs. I think that we have roughly 50 people joining this webinar today. And I would love if we could have a volunteer of someone who can discuss the way screening of deaf children has been impactful for them in their approach to deaf education. Is there anyone who's brave enough to share an anecdote from your own experience? Anyone? Doesn't seem like we have any volunteers, but that's okay. So maybe we can, as we go along, someone will be inspired to volunteer and share a story. I I'm looking in the chat. It looks like there may be messages in the chat. So I'm wondering if someone, I'm sorry, the interpreter's clarifying who's monitoring the chat. I'm wondering if anyone has commented in there. This is John. Josh, can you see me? This is John. He's saying no, sorry, I can only see the interpreter. Okay, no problem. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. My computer isn't giving me a lot of options this evening, and so I'm just doing the best I can here. Let's see. So I will share another screen now from the National Association of School Psychologists. They have a list of professional standards explaining some of what's expected in the psychological field. And so I'll share that with you with part of it left blank. So bear with me. Just bear with me here. All right, let me try again. All right, can everyone see the position statement now? Okay, great. So in general, what you see in blue is a goal for school psychologists working with deaf children. Just a moment for the interpreter. The video is very blurry. Just a moment for the interpreter. We're just having some video issues. It's not freezing, it's just very grainy. So the blue was what? I may try to just reboot if I continue to have issues, to reboot and then join back on, because it seems like the pixelation is difficult. So if you could give me 2 minutes, I'm going to try to restart, reboot, and jump back on, see if that helps the video quality. So if you could just give me 2 minutes, John, would that be all right? John's saying sure. You said John. So anything I could do to help, just bear with us. Sorry about that. I guess this would be a good time to run to the restroom if you need it, grab a coffee, grab something to drink. Our apologies for the issues here, and then I will just turn video off for now. All right, so can everyone see the share screen? Okay. So I'll try to revisit what I just mentioned before. This is the NASP, the agency, the National Association for School Psychologists, their standard practice papers and best practices for the profession. And so you can see what I've highlighted here has been used by other professional organizations, consultants. And it says they enlist the assistance of other specialists in supervisory, consultative, and referral roles in providing effective services as a team approach for working with deaf and hard of hearing children in schools. So if you want to do some sort of evaluation and you're struggling, if you're noticing that students are struggling with learning, and you see, for example, a deaf child born to a deaf parent or a deaf family who's still struggling with literacy, reading at or beyond grade level, that's something we often see, that deaf children of deaf parents read at or beyond the reading level, whereas deaf children born to hearing parents oftentimes can struggle due to linguistic access. And so sometimes it's important to assess whether it's something that is to do with linguistic access, language access, or other sorts of developmental or neurological factors. Tennessee School for the Deaf provides services, and your states may as well, but we're always happy to assist and discuss or consult through different mediums to help address issues in your states. And you should feel free to reach out to us, and we'll discuss that more later. Just a moment for the interpreter. Said I'm not skilled with what? There are some that are just don't have familiarity in working with deaf and hard of hearing children, and so connecting with professionals in that field in a consultative capacity is also beneficial. So I'll try to go back to my slides now. So what I had highlighted in blue previously was to do with best practices for work with this group. And there are a lot of considerations based on age, language development, other types of development. These are all factors that should be considered, whether students are using signed or spoken language. It's a good opportunity you should take the opportunity to consider these factors before collaborating with others to address the needs of these students. For example, of course, I wouldn't, as a person who uses signed language, I wouldn't be the best fit to advise on or work with students who have an oral approach and use spoken English or cued speech, for example. So we'd want to meet the needs of the specific students based on their IEP and their IEP team. And the interpreters will switch.
In addition, sometimes if we do a one-on-one evaluation with the child, we may have to depend more on individual, like interviewing the family, do some observational eval, and have like an ITP approach to consider what kind of eligibility this child has based on different diagnosis. So we'll have to, and you would discuss with the team what the needs of this particular child is. I can paste this in the chat so that you're able to open it and read it on your own time. The link that's showing in my PowerPoint. I'll have to start the screen share again. Because my slides are missing. All right, now, can everyone see my slide share? Thumbs up. Ethical considerations that we have to have. The Tennessee Special Education Law has a number of components that we have to adhere to when we're doing assessments on children. We're talking about language needs, social, emotional needs, behavior, cognitive, and then some parts of the evaluation. Some parts of the evaluation are mandatory, and then we can select other parts as needed. And these are for deaf and hard of hearing children. They have to answer a specific number of questions to be eligible, and we have to abide by the law which tells us what we have to do. So the criteria have different professionals involved. Cognitive, there's a lot of observation. We have to consider autism and which part of that autism is related to the behavior of the student and their development. If a student has struggle hearing, then does that affect their social skills? And we have to separate those two. There are some very complex factors involved, but if we collaborate with those involved, we can get through it. We have to talk about intelligence. And as far as disability goes and other intellectual disability. And that could definitely impact a child's future regarding placement, services received, access to services in the future. So we have to make sure that we follow protocol and the criteria to get the student the services needed. Working with I've worked with deaf, or if you've worked with deaf and hard of hearing students in the past, cultural competency is just one or two parts of this. I've worked with other professionals doing evaluations, and I've studied 200 students in an evaluation. And used that data, which would help us understand why in comparison these different groups that we were studying. Does the teacher sign? Does the teacher not know sign? We've had an opportunity to study and observe those students. This slide talks about a professional standard for psychologists and the treatment and what the process is for that related to mental health. There's one professional competency in maybe one or two or three different parts, but there's an entire field or spectrum. And how do we solve the issues that arise? Sarah, I need you to help me out.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it either.
Yeah, okay. So if we're talking about consultation, if we're talking about networking, if we're talking about support, and how do we get through that process related to mental health at the school, we have to read about the different approaches. So there are new evaluations for deaf and hard of hearing children. So if you're doing a first time evaluation, We try to reach out to more people in the ITP team or IEP team. Maybe a deaf or hard of hearing professional such as myself. Be a part of that evaluation team, because I could possibly have tools that would be helpful. So it could be a consultation time of a week or two that we go back and forth and discuss the data, the family data, the instructional data, so that we can feel more confident as we go through the evaluation process. It's kind of more like a mentorship. And that also is considered, part of the professional growth of the individual. I think there was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, a lot of growth mindset over versus a fixed mindset. So for people in general, what do you know and what don't you know? And how you approach that process. You make mistakes, you learn from those mistakes, and that is a growth mindset. It's used a lot. So we're trying our best to see what if the person can see what is wrong, if they can acknowledge what is wrong, and then navigate and do better as they move through that. So the IEP team or the evaluation team can then know what to do. Again, a collaboration effort. A fixed mindset, on the other hand, is different than a growth mindset. They both have positives and negatives. They both have standards. Your video is getting worse and worse and worse, and I'm really fighting with it. I'm sorry. Like, it's just awful. Yeah. We can try that. I'm willing to try, but it's like really bad. Ah, okay.
I don't know if you can see Becky saying, I would recommend, maybe try one more time, try to restart and see. And if not, we'll see. We may just close early. I'm sorry. I feel bad for the interpreters.
So we'll have another short bathroom break.
And Ruann, I can start when he comes back.
If you're not fluent in ASL, Universal Nonverbal Intelligence Test, second edition, the unit UNIT 2. As the person who is the examiner only needs to be just using gestures or pantomime. But if you can communicate well with the student, encourage the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, 5th edition. Woodcock-Johnson, Academic Achievement, 4th edition, WJ4. It's a good one. Another one is the Gray Oral Silent Reading Test. I'm not familiar with that one myself. Fluency.
That's more of a fluency-based test.
Oh, yeah. He's trying to think of something. I guess I distracted him. Kaufman test. And Marlana is asking, what about the KETA3?
That's another good one in terms of flexibility between the Woodcock. I'm trying to see, is my picture clear enough, or should I continue typing? We could try. I'm going to try to sign, and if we're struggling, then I'll go back to the chat. The Woodcock-Johnson, the WJ4, it seems to be a lot more self-led, determining your own reading level. It's harder, but it's a different approach than the KTEA. The KTEA can be signed questions with options for choices, and those are included in the KTEA. But students who can read independently and can sign the questions, the Woodcock-Johnson is better because they can read and answer the questions themselves. So read them and then sign their responses. So that lets you take advantage of both tests. So I put the acronyms expanded name in the chat. Oh, it looks like Marlena and I responded at the same time. I think, again, the KTEA seems to be more deaf friendly. Whereas the Woodcock-Johnson, I would use it. I think especially when evaluating children in public schools rather than in schools for the deaf, I encourage the KTEA. It seems to be more comprehensible for depending on their literacy and reading abilities. And the reason for that is that in schools for the deaf versus public schools, there's a difference in terms of the internal testing data, MAP, cold probes. There's clearly more professional, clearly more professions doing these assessments, versus in public schools where there can be more hesitation and uncertainty about those, and then the KTEA might be a better fit. I think it can be really a challenge in terms of considering intellectual disability and autism. And those are cases where you will often want to collaborate with someone in those specialties, because depending on the diagnosis, that can really be a challenge. So it's beneficial to have a strong team to work with to best determine where the struggles are stemming from in these children.
Does anyone have any additional questions? It's 6:59, so we will, I know technically we can go on till 7:30, but I feel like the interpreter's eyeballs may catch on fire if if we try to go 30 more minutes. So we do the best we can. And I certainly, Josh, I appreciate you taking this time out on your vacation to speak to the professionals who have attended tonight. I'm sure that they have appreciated. Of all of the questions, as the SWSS coordinator, I tend to get school psychology questions, because school psychologists tend to be at a loss because they can't communicate, but they know that they need to assess and get a baseline and present level. So it's a challenge, and we appreciate your knowledge base, and we appreciate your willingness to work with schools all across the state.
And I also want to thank the audience for your patience with the technical difficulties we've been experiencing. I really appreciate it, and the interpreters as well for working to try to figure out and interpret based on these despite these circumstances. So thank you all for your flexibility and for your time. And I will make sure, I'm sorry, the interpreter can't see this now. And I'll make sure I can provide the materials to all of you after the presentation tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. Josh, if you will send me your slides, I can send them out to everyone so they can read over them and contact you if there are any questions, or me. So.
Absolutely. I will do that as soon as we close the meeting. I will send those. I'll put them in the Zoom chat, and then you can disseminate them to the team afterwards. I see there's a few icons. I want to make sure I'm able to do that.
I would prefer if you would send it to me, email me directly, and then I'll just email the people who presented or who participated tonight. I'm afraid if you put it in the chat, I don't know if it, oh, okay, there we go. I'll
Oh,
save it.
I just put it.
Great.
And
So-
then Becky, you can, send them as you see fit also.
Great. Or if you want, if you're participating, you can go ahead and download it right now, but I will download it as well and have it on hand.
So I.
He's
I'm
gonna
not
send it
sure
to
if I've seen
Becky.
that, but
Yeah,
Thank
he's
you.
going to send it to Becky, and then people might not be comfortable clicking on it from here, and they would prefer to click on it through the email.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Josh. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. John McMahon, thank you for all your help tonight, and thank you for everyone who took time out of your evening to join us for this conversation. We look forward to seeing you at the July CDEP-10, which is on the Tennessee Deafblind Project. So thanks again, and everyone have a great evening. Thank you, interpreters.
See you, Becky.
Thank you, Ruann.
Thanks for your support, Becky and Ruann. Nice to meet you both.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Y'all have a great night. And, it just, when you're using Wi-Fi, I think, we've all been on vacation and the Wi-Fi is just not good. I'm plugged into the wall. And because the Wi-Fi it's not good for signing. Now, if it's somebody that you're listening to and you're interpreting for, that's different. But yet another obstacle for the deaf.
Yeah, because sometimes they're like, oh, I'll turn off my video and that'll kind of save some bandwidth and then I can just talk. But obviously that's not an option.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was rough.
You're muted.
So thank you.
Yeah, I wonder
your
if,
patience.
if they brought their own hotspot, if that would, because then they're not pulling, everybody else in the hotel is using the Wi-Fi or wherever he's at,
Right.
downloading it. So I do wonder if that hotspot, because this is not the first time it's happened. It's like, oh, come on, y'all, like throw a dog a bone here.
I know. And I remember at the very beginning of the pandemic, it was horrid.
Mhm.
So at least it's gotten some better.
Right.
Maybe just
Ugh.
this much.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your all's help. Every time I learn something new when I do these to
Yeah.
improve upon for next time. And speaking of which, I'm still